Okay, so we have two videos for this. This first one is going to be types of solutions. Okay, we have a couple different types of solutions, but the first thing you need to understand is, and you guys have all done this, there's a couple different ways that we can get something to dissolve in a solution. First and foremost, it has to be able to dissolve. So it has to be able to, we have to make it soluble, okay? So it has to be soluble in this case, we're going to talk about water, so it has to be soluble in water, okay? So if you're making, let's say you're making Kool-Aid or sweet tea, let's go with sweet tea, okay? So if I'm making sweet tea, okay, one of the things that you always have to do is you have to boil the water and put the bags of tea into it, okay? Now, at that point, once you have the tea, the next question is, when do you add the sugar? If I'm making sweet tea, I add the sugar when it's hot, when the water is hot. And this is because I know that sugar dissolves better when it's warm, right? The next thing I need to do is I need to stir, okay? Now, the last thing I want to do, I'm not going to add sugar cubes, or I'm not going to add rock salt. I'm going to add the crushed sugar. And there is a reason for that. So if I'm looking at these three things here that I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you some chemistry words for how we make things dissolve, okay? So in this case, when we talk about adding it when it's hot, we know to increase, and this is a general rule because you know in chemistry we always have exceptions, but to increase solubility, I am going to increase temperature. And you guys know that most things dissolve better in a solution that's hot or warm, okay? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stir the solution. Another word for this that we're going to say is agitation. Not aggravation, agitation, okay? So you want to, agitation, or I'll put here stir, shake, whatever makes you happy. And the next thing is we said that I wanted to use crushed sugar instead of like rock sugar. And the reason you want to do that is we call this surface area. If I have a big cube of sugar, okay, don't mind my drawing, it's bad. The water can only attack the surfaces, right? But if I break this up into basically all these little particles, right, and it sits on the bottom of that, and then I stir it, every one of these particles is going to come in contact with water molecules, not just the ones on these surfaces. So surface area, if we increase it, so basically increase surface area, or sorry, yeah, we want increased surface area or smaller particle size, okay? And all of these are factors that are going to help things in a solution become more soluble, okay? All right, and so we have a couple different types of solutions that we want to talk about. Flip this over. We have an unsaturated solution, and this means can hold more solute. So basically more molecules of solute per solvent. And a lot of times you're going to see this as grams per 100 grams of water, which we also know 100 grams of water is basically like saying 100 milliliters of water. Okay? So an unsaturated solution, basically an unsaturated solution is like when you make Kool-Aid and you're like, this needs more sugar. That's unsaturated because you know that it can still hold more, and you're not going to see any particles at the bottom of your Kool-Aid. Okay, you guys have all made Kool-Aid, and you know that sometimes you just dump sugar in and it sits down there at the bottom. That is not an unsaturated solution because at that point it can't hold anymore. An unsaturated solution means that I can still add more and it'll dissolve. Now, a saturated solution this means that you're at the max. It cannot hold anymore. If I put one more crystal in the solution, it's going to sit at the bottom of the cup, okay? So this is the maximum amount. Y'all can sign out, yeah. Maximum amount of solute
Thank you. See you next
per
week, right?
100 grams of solvent. Okay, well, or per whatever the units of solvent or however much solvent you're going to use, okay? So it's the maximum amount that you can actually have in the solution, okay? And this is also, it means that the rate of, we're going to say dissolution equals the rate of crystallization. So when something turns to a crystal, something else dissolves. So it constantly is going back and forth, okay? And then we get to our last one, which is a super saturated solution. All right, and this one is interesting. This one holds more than the maximum amount. Okay, now this is when it gets a little bit crazy, because you guys think that when you take a bunch of sugar and you dump it in, you stir and you stir and stir, and no more dissolves, that is going to be a supersaturated solution. It's not. That is a saturated solution because the maximum amount has already been dissolved and everything else is sitting at the bottom. Okay? So if I have a solution like that, so here's my solution, and I have a bunch of sugar sitting here at the bottom. And let's say that this is at room temperature. In order to make this a saturated solution, I have to heat this. So let's boil it. We're going to put this up to 100 degrees C. And then what's going to happen is all of these, the solid that's down here, all of your sugar, it's going to dissolve. So now I have a solution that holds more than the maximum amount. Okay? Now, the key is, though, this has to cool down. So once it cools down, then it is a saturated solution. So we heat it to 100 degrees C, everything dissolves, and then it has to cool. And then at this point, now this is supersaturated. But these are very unstable. So if I add just a little bit, so let's say I add to this, let me draw a little spoon here, okay? Ooh, that's ugly, but let's say I put some sugar on this spoon and I dump this sugar into here. Let's say I put in here 1 gram of sugar, okay? What do you think is going to come out on this bottom? Well, I'm going to tell you. You're going to get your 1 gram. So you're going to get 1 gram plus, and this is the key, whatever the extra amount is. So whatever you had over here, that's going to crash back out down here at the bottom, okay? So again, in order to be super saturated, you have to have a saturated solution. We heat it up till everything dissolves, let it cool back down, okay? And then at that point, it's super saturated. And it's very unstable, so if I add just a little bit more sugar to it, all of the extra that dissolved is not going to crash out, okay? So those are your 3 types of solutions: unsaturated, saturated, and supersaturated.